Welcome to the Guide to Wellness podcast. I'm Susannah, licensed acupuncturist. We're here to chat about health and well-being. Just a reminder, everything in this podcast is information only, not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. It's useful information to maintain a healthy life balance. Hello there, everybody. We are privileged today to have our very favorite Dr. B here on the conversation. This is Dr. Breana McElgunn, who has been my friend and mentor and collaborator for, 15, 18, 20 years now. She's here in the studio with us to share her wisdom, and we're going to talk about our collaboration with Guide to Wellness, Great Tuning Healing Center, and Gallatin Valley Natural Medicine. She is a naturopathic physician, a stellar one with so much information and knowledge to share. Love working with Dr. B. And I'm going to send us right over to you, Breana, and jump on in. And we're going to talk about this partnership that we have and we share with our patients so that our patients can really work on their optimal health outcomes and work with us as guides to making a difference in the world and making a difference in people's health.
Thank you for having me on the podcast today, Susannah. I'm excited to share wisdom, knowledge, experience with the listeners.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you've said, we have collaborated for a number of years. It's been so long I've lost track of how long that's been, and it's been an enjoyable collaboration as I've learned from you with acupuncture, and hopefully I've taught you a few things as well.
Mm-hmm. And all the Chinese herbs that we share back and forth and the nutritional conversations we have. So we're going to be chatting in great detail, but one of the things that we all really like to focus on in our collaboration is what we call the 3 T's. So we test, treat, and teach. And this is how we get the results that we do with our patients. So we want to chat more about that. And if you want to talk to us a little bit more about our collaboration, what that looks like, go right ahead.
Absolutely. I love the 3 T's. My favorite, in fact, is the teaching aspect of really helping people to understand what their test results are telling us about their unique situation, their unique health, and then implementing a customized, individualized treatment plan that does take into account many different aspects of health. Physical health, what's going on in their body, what's going on in their organ systems, their emotional health, their mental health, and just their whole wellness. So I love that acupuncture can be such a great way to round that out. Mm-hmm. So when we think about the 3 T's, testing gives us objective data. Numbers don't lie, as I like to say. It tells us where that person is in that moment, whether that test is blood testing for, blood sugar or thyroid hormones or ovarian or testicular hormones, or that testing is for what's happening in digestion, a stool test. Urine tests can be really helpful. So part of my, as well as yours, is determining what tests would be our number one priority based on the symptoms the patient is presenting with, as well as what their budget might be. If budget is not limited, we can do a variety of tests right up front. If budget has more limitations, I prioritize what tests would be most necessary as we develop that foundation to build on.
Yeah, let me backtrack just a little, because it sounds like I'm sitting here listening to you and like, what if I've never ever talked to Breana or Susannah before? This sounds a little complicated and overwhelming, possibly. So, can we go back to foundations and then let's go back a little. Like, where do people start in this process? It seems like the labs that they would start with is just that basic blood chemistry they're getting either from us, from you, or that you're ordering and then I'm helping interpret, or from their primary care doctor. Correct?
Or even health fairs. Many medical facilities, hospital facilities offer health fairs. So you can get your basic panels, complete blood count, comprehensive metabolic panel, cholesterol levels. Right. And that gives us, again, a nice starting foundation. Right. Some people are seeking out those tests because they don't feel well. And knowing that testing.
Tell us more about that part. That
For seeking out?
Yeah, like when you go to the doctor and you get your annual labs and they say, gee, Breana, you look fantastic. And your labs look great. And you're like thinking, well, how come I don't feel great?
How come I don't feel great? Because the lab has ranges that they determine based on the populations that they're sampling. So they're going to give you a reference range that says this is what we think is appropriate, but it may not be appropriate for that unique individual, which is really fun as we collaborate and, again, look at each individual and the trouble that they're having. So just because a lab test says it's quote-unquote normal doesn't mean that it's normal or appropriate for you or that individual. So,
or could it be that normal range? Let's see. The old-fashioned one is vitamin C, right? That the normal range is defined as that which prevents scurvy, right?
Right. And that's not necessarily beneficial because it takes such a small amount of vitamin C to prevent scurvy.
What about vitamin B12? That's one we see a lot.
B12, when I look at my local lab ranges, that doesn't line up with the functional day-to-day stressors that most of us experience. So even if the lab says your B12 level is normal, it's not necessarily appropriate or beneficial for that unique individual. So we really do a good job of determining, is there appropriate lab ranges for that individual that we want to achieve? Or are those lab ranges outright abnormal? And that's giving us a diagnosis. Like, as an example, thyroid. Thyroid happens to be one of my areas of expertise and specialty. For 20 plus years, I've been dealing with thyroid conditions, and many people who go to their general practitioner, family doctor, get their thyroid blood test, and it's only one test. I, at times, use up to 5 different tests to determine if that thyroid function is appropriate for an individual. And if it is appropriate, as we looked at all of those tests, great. Now we can cross that off the list that says, in fact, your thyroid is stable. Now we're going to dig into another arena of testing, whether that might be the adrenal hormone testing or, ovarian hormones if someone's menopausal. But thyroid is one of those areas where oftentimes patients are told, your tests are normal. There's nothing wrong with your thyroid. And that's not entirely the story for each person.
And so sometimes it seems that in our collaboration, actually not sometimes, often, we find that I notice in my work with somebody that they're appearing to be hypothyroid or possibly even an autoimmune thyroid picture, but I don't know for sure. So then I send them to you. You apply your magic and your wisdom in the thyroid, and lo and behold, we find that, the active thyroid hormone is not being converted well in the body, or there's some other inflammation, or like you said, there's some adrenal cortex stress hormone pathway involvement that's keeping this person from having access to their thyroid hormone, which translates into Chinese medicine as they don't have energy. They don't have access to their qi. They might have plenty of it in their blood, but it's not moving into the tissues and showing up in a way that they can actually feel well, have a healthy immune system, and get out and exercise and have an optimal weight and all those things that we enjoy.
To be in a wellness state. That is our goal.
So then what we do is we're also working with nutrition, right? We're not just treating the thyroid, but then we're also working in the liver and with nutrition and
the
with
intestines.
Minerals and the intestines and the adrenals and sleep and meditation and exercise, right? To make the thyroid work better, correct?
Correct. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We talked about
the whole package.
The spokes of a wheel of the central theme, and then all these different tangents that we can see that may need additional support for that individual to be optimizing their health and wellness.
So again, that sounds a little complicated. So how do we make this simple for people? Or is it not?
It's the complicated nature of it is determining what direction to go first. Again, some of those foundational tests that might be normal, and then we take it kind of the next step and decide if if this test is the next one. And that's where experience comes into play. And that's where also really listening to what the patient is telling you and the symptoms that they're experiencing, the severity, the frequency, the constellation of all those symptoms put together. And unfortunately, in our current medical model, there's not enough time to discuss those in detail with your provider because that's not the system as it exists. So I think we do a really good job in our collaborations that we dedicate time to each visit so we can listen, we can get feedback, we can discuss those with patients. Because again, a 5 to 7 minute visit, with your family practice provider is insufficient to really appreciate and understand what's happening in an individual.
And how many times have we found that people tell us the answer when we give them that time?
Absolutely, because we're able to be present and they have a platform to vocalize and describe in detail the challenges that they have.
And maybe to just relax the mind a little bit and say, oh, actually, this has felt complicated to me in the past, but when I really am honest and quiet down the static in my mind, what I find is this is the problem.
Correct. And sometimes, often, the constellations of symptoms that people experience are very interrelated to, as in acupuncture, to maybe issues with the liver or issues with digestion. So we can categorize those symptoms to say the big umbrella says, quite likely this is the system that's struggling, and this is where we're going to start our testing.
Right. So
and that goes back to our teaching of understanding that.
So in traditional Chinese medicine, and let me just add a little bit of education for the American public here. When we use the word acupuncture here in this conversation, what we're referring to is the larger system of traditional Chinese medicine that includes this diagnostic system. It includes everything we're talking about here in this, using diagnosis to test, using clinical assessments, labs, using whatever tools possible, listening to the patient, physical exam, right? So the diagnostic system is huge in your naturopathic system and in traditional Chinese medicine.
Very
massive,
much so.
Right? It's very important. Then listening to the patient, right? That's the testing piece. And then ordering labs that are appropriate for that patient. And then where our skill comes in is with interpreting all that information and narrowing it down into what we call in Chinese medicine a pattern of disharmony.
I love that phrase.
And we also talk about the root and the branch. So what we mean is how can we get to the root cause of somebody's condition, right? And then
not just be out there treating on the branches.
Right. But however, we still need to treat. So the branches are like the symptoms.
Yes.
So we still need to treat and address the symptoms because that's what brought this person in. How to maintain that optimal well-being is the root, right? So you think of it like a tree and you do both. So sometimes I find that treating the branches, treating the symptoms is what allows the patient to feel better enough to go, okay, this is the problem and now I have the strength or the relaxation or whatever it is, the absence of symptoms, to address that root cause. Right?
And sometimes finding the root cause is very difficult. Sometimes we have multiple root causes that can lead to the complexity for some individuals.
Which leads us to our case study we're going to chat about today. But I just want to continue with this theme of test, treat, teach. So we're going to keep coming back to that. So testing we've talked about a lot so far. Treating is herbal medicine, nutrition, what is the patient eating, how are they sleeping? That's going to dovetail into teaching on how to do that. So it's herbs and supplements. It's also acupuncture as a tool, but the acupuncture is not the primary tool in this case. It's one of them. But the bigger one is what is the patient doing in their daily lives?
Yep.
Right?
Or are they taking medications or using over-the-counter products that are either aggravating, they're interacting together, that's creating, imbalances?
And so one of the things that you often, I find, do is to help people understand how to optimize those medications. Here are the ones you really need. And here are the ones that maybe we can work towards you not needing anymore, or gee, these two are interacting. How can we fine tune that? So as a naturopathic physician, you have some prescriptive ability that
Yes.
allows you to finesse that. And that's when I send patients over to you to like, what about this medication, right? So you're really good at that. I love it. And then we're always going to send people back to their primary doctor.
Correct. There are certain medications that my naturopathic license does not allow me to prescribe. And I will offer guidance or input to patients to say, I'd like you to go back to that prescribing doctor and ask about these questions, maybe consider an alternative. Here's some options that I'm familiar with, but I can't legally prescribe because, it's important to stay within the scope of all of our own unique trainings. But yeah, medications can be a real advantage and sometimes a real disadvantage. Or even if we think about, again, going back to that thyroid idea, there's a spectrum of different types of thyroid medications. And I have a number of patients that we use 3 different medications to achieve balance and stability for them just for their thyroid.
Right. And we do similar things with the herbs. Yeah, balancing them all out. In fact, the herbal formulas are all intended to balance the individual herbs and ingredients inside the formula, so the total product has a balance to it. So there's less chance of side effects. Pretty interesting, huh?
I love that.
So we promised to talk about our friend Molly.
Oh, Molly.
We have her permission. That's not her real name. She's going to laugh when she hears this.
Yes.
Okay, so tell us about Molly, and she's just a really good example of how you can take complexity and chronic symptoms and move them into a very targeted treatment plan and then education on how to get this person feeling back to their normal, lovely self.
The thing that I find the most interesting or fascinating about Molly is that she has already a fairly stable kind of day-to-day health, her lifestyle choices, her activity and exercise. So despite doing those things, she still hasn't felt well. She has struggled with what we would call episodic flare-ups. And it's really pointing us in a direction that her immune system is at part of the root cause that we're getting at. So with Molly and not getting the resolution through fine-tuning her diet, adding in different nutritional and herbal supplements,
and
doing
also
the
going
acupuncture.
to her doctor and getting on thyroid medications.
Yep, and going to her primary care as well as a specialist in endocrinology hasn't resulted in her getting the improvements that she's seeking. So we are going to be digging into more of her immune system, specifically tick-borne illnesses based on the episodic nature, the flare-ups and symptoms that she has.
You mean Lyme disease?
Lyme disease is one of them, and co-infections is a term that comes into Lyme disease. Now, there are documented tick-borne illnesses in upwards of 43 states in the U.S., and ticks can transmit a number of illnesses, not just Lyme disease. We think about infections called Bartonella, Babesia, Ehrlichia, Anaplasma, Epstein-Barr virus, other viruses, West Nile virus. So we're looking at the insult to Molly's immune system through blood testing and taking her symptom picture. That still continues to be a challenge, and plugging that in so that we are determining through blood testing what she's dealing with, what she's juggling. And this is just one type of immune investigation that I like to do specific with tick-borne illnesses. And there are a number of amazing resources for patients and providers to go through symptom checklists to help educate themselves and understand what maybe they need to advocate for. So here's another idea, is that Molly is a great advocate for her own health and asks those questions and probes the provider to say, but that doesn't make sense. Why is this still happening? Why aren't I feeling better? And sometimes that is really necessary for that advocacy.
And I would add that's something, because I've known her for quite some time and followed her case, and she's been very diligent over years, actually, with first just sort of quietly, stoically, just ponying up, or not ponying up, what's the word? Just sort of, just muscling through her symptoms because there was no logical, easy explanation, and yet it was real. And so she kept advocating and looking for who is going to listen to me, is going to help me find the solution. So she needed to match the right the right solution with her case. And she's been really diligent. It's taken a very long time for her to figure this out. And so I think sometimes people get frustrated because it takes so long. They want an easy answer. And so I just want to, say to people, it's like, keep plugging away, keep listening to your own wisdom, keep listening to what's important, and keep looking for those solutions because they are there.
And the resources like doing podcasts, or if there are, internet-based websites that you've explored, or blogs, people are sharing their symptoms. So the more an individual digs and keeps looking for those roots, you got to dig to get to the roots. And again, we can have multiple root causes that are contributing to someone's complex case. And this is really what we're talking about with Molly, is that our standard testing told us some information, but the tests that we talk about for tick-borne illnesses, I use a exclusive tick-borne illness specialty lab. I have no financial investment with them, side note, but they're experts in doing that testing and finding those things.
So you're an expert yourself. I'm an expert myself as well in the traditional Chinese medicine, functional medicine side. And so we're putting that together, and we're still reaching out to other experts, right?
Yes,
it takes
because
a team.
We talked about yesterday of we each have our lane that we stay in with our training, our scope of practice, our understanding, and we bring in multiple providers to address certain areas. There's certain things I'm not an expert in, and I don't want to be an expert in that.
And for example, in Molly's case, the first thing we did was after the primary care physician, diagnosed her thyroid off, is we sent her off to an endocrinologist. But then in her case, the frustration was that she was on this medication for a year and it hasn't touched her symptoms. So we have avoided a medical emergency, and that's really important, right? So now we can work on the root. Now that we know she's medically stable, we can start to look at that root cause, right? If we hadn't done that piece, that would have been irresponsible. And unethical, even to some degree. Yes.
That the Hippocratic Oath does tell us to do no harm first. Do no harm.
Right.
So finding those avenues, finding those collaborative partners, and that's a conversation I have with patients often, is what medical doctor or osteopathic doctor or nurse practitioner are we employing to be on your care team that's willing to be a collaborative partner? Because sometimes we have to walk through the insurance loops so that testing can be paid for by insurance, or we get prior approvals to do specialized testing. And sometimes we have to go outside of those standard testing methods and use highly specialized laboratories, which sometimes they bill insurance, sometimes they don't. And that's that investment of, resources that sometimes we really need to have those conversations with patients.
Yeah, and that's, we talk a lot together and with patients about respecting people's budget there. And that includes time, energy, money. We respect their intelligence. We respect their budget.
Yes.
Right. And because we know that this is a path. It's not, people want a quick fix, but unfortunately, optimal health is
costly. Honestly, with the price of food and, doing the activities, paying for the testing, paying for medicines.
And at the end of the day, what do you really want? And do you want your health and your mental health and physical health? And I chat with people all the time about what is it that you really want?
And maybe it's to be able to ride their bike with their grandkids.
Yeah. And what is that worth?
And how are we going to get you there? Or maybe it's, a new career.
Yeah.
What are those goals?
Yeah. Cool. So in Molly's case, we're doing some testing, and then the treatment will be informed by the testing, and then the treatment's going to include. It's going to continue to include acupuncture, Chinese herbs, Western herbs. Right. So that's where you and I are collaborating, and we're doing more research as we need to develop what is the best simplest, most effective herbal and supplementation protocol for Molly to get well. And in her case, it's going to be timed with these cyclical flares of symptoms.
And then what our test results are going to tell us.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then tell us a little bit more, because you love it so much, about the teaching part of what we're going to do with her. And I should say, continue to do with her.
Absolutely. So teaching, from my perspective as a naturopathic doctor, is number one, making sure that I understand what the test results are. And if I have any questions about those, I call the lab. I get my own education to be able to then explain and teach and educate the patient. And because I've worked with this lab for some time, there's already a base level of education. Or I'll dig into other resources that I know are reliable, that are keeping up on research and developments, so that I'm educating myself. You know, we always have to do continuing education as providers, right? Which is one of my favorite things. I enjoy that education. But then educating the patient about what their test results are and what they mean and how we're going to address those imbalances. So just being able to understand what data means for that individual. And again, tapping into experts, calling people and saying, I'm struggling with this, sending an email, using book resources or, again, podcasts.
And that takes time on your part and my part.
Absolutely. And that's the investment we do to get patients feeling better. That's part of my job, is to continue to learn new tricks, new tools, how to implement a medication I've used for some time, but in a new way.
Now tell us about, what's Molly's end going to look like?
Well, our end for her is going to be really settling down these episodic flare-ups that she has, so that day to day she feels better, but doing it within the context of the tests that we're going to run, and say, because I'm assuming we're going to have some abnormal results that are going to come back, and it's really going to carve out a new path of treatment and support for her.
So the treatment is based on the testing, and that includes our clinical assessments, the pulse diagnosis, the tongue diagnosis from Chinese medicine, the physical exam that you do and I do, right, and her symptom picture. So, but then it's really going to also add into, how is she sleeping? We're going to continue to teach breathing, meditation,
relaxation.
What time of day do you exercise? Time-restricted eating. So what you eat, when you eat, why are you choosing to eat these things to optimize your health, is a huge part of teaching her, correct?
Absolutely. Those lifestyle components. And someone who has chronic relapsing illness like Molly, sleep is absolutely critical. And if the sleep is out of balance, dysfunctional, unrefreshing, we fundamentally have to improve that.
Right.
Because without sleep, we cannot heal the way that we need to or should.
Yeah. So that's, we spend a lot of time chatting with patients and giving people different herbs. And we've been doing this with her for a while now, too, on like calming down those cortisols at night, improving melatonin in ways that don't even involve taking melatonin, but just how to promote that circadian rhythm, how to optimize those cortisols in the mornings and early in the day, and allow them to decline through the evening so you can drop off and have a restful night's sleep. And all these things are super important.
In naturopathic medicine, we fully believe and invest in the healing power of nature. When we remove obstacles, when we provide the body with the ingredients to heal,
love it.
Things happen. And so that ingredient list, that recipe for that individual is very unique. And again, that's a fundamental principle in naturopathic medicine, is the body has the power to heal when the obstacles are removed, as well as identifying the obstacles. Sometimes you have to identify them before, and again, that takes us right back to testing. Are those obstacles present, and how do we remove them?
I love that. I think that's a nice way to wind up our conversation for today. I know we're going to have you back on this podcast, because we're going to be talking about Epstein-Barr and chronic viruses down the road here.
Favorite topic of mine.
I know, me too. So anyway, because we have so much experience and success with it, that's the reason why we're going to talk about it. But in the meantime, I love how you talk about identifying and removing obstacles, and then allowing the body to simply return to what it knows how to do already. Right?
So if people are interested in reaching out to me and engaging in more collaboration with Susannah, my practice name is called Gallatin Valley Natural Medicine. Website is gvnm.info, and phone number is 406-587-0858.
Beautiful. And y'all know how to reach us. It's www.greatturninghealing.com. 406-599-0088. We're in the lovely Gallatin Valley of Montana. You can access us from all over the world if you like.
I also do telemedicine.
I know you do.
That's an advantage for people who may not have the ability or luxury of traveling to Montana for
and
treatment.
you've been doing that for a long time. So
Yes.
it's very, very good. So to close, Dr. B, tell us your one favorite health tip if people could do nothing else. What could
so
they
I have
do?
2 health tips.
2?
I thought of a second one. The number one is keep moving, whether that moving is within your house. Outside is best, but keep moving. Go for walks. Take your dog out. Sit in the sunshine in the yard. Have the picnic in the park. My second favorite tip is flossing. I am all in on flossing, and I have flossers in my vehicle and my kids floss because we're in the car. And so flossing, dental health is a huge obstacle that can be improved upon. So flossing is my second one.
Oh, I love it. And you know what? Both of those have all kinds of metaphors, don't they? For removing obstacles and removing and keeping moving mentally, psychologically, spiritually, moving through whatever obstacles you may be finding new ways to do things that surprise you that you didn't know you could do, right? I'll leave it at that, folks. We'll look forward to hearing from you. Enjoy a lovely, lovely day, and you take care. But thank you.
Well, that was super fun.